Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Wadier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Wadier, and I'm here as always with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey Scott, how are you?
Fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We are going to go big picture. Intermittent fasting, a promising dietary intervention for autoimmune diseases. This is out of the Autoimmunity Reviews in 2023. So we are going to talk about things like psoriasis and rheumatoid arthritis and multiple sclerosis and thyroiditis like Hashimoto's or autoimmune thyroid issues. And having been in the functional medicine space for quite some time, there is an absolute application, an increase of these things that we see walking into our consultations day in and day out. So with that framework, there's a lot of promising intervention that can be said when it comes to fasting and dietary and lifestyle changes. So it's going to be a fun conversation. If you are new to the podcast, you want to learn more about what we do, why we do it, head back, listen to episode 1. It gives you our story on how fasting has transformed our lives and why we do what we do week in and week out. If you're a long-term listener, I want to give you a shout out. Thank you so much for making us and fasting a part of your lifestyle transformation. If you're looking to lose weight, reverse disease, or just try to simplify your life when it comes to your health journey, then we believe that fasting is a key component to that process, and we will hopefully continue to support you on your journey. Either way, one of us, some of us, all of us know someone or have personally been affected by these types of issues when we talk about big picture health epidemics, heart disease, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, blood sugar issues. But this autoimmunity category of disease is something that is also not immune from the drastic increases that we've seen happening in different populations and younger age groups. So we want to go 30,000 foot view here, which is why we picked this article in terms of looking at, all of these studies were done in Ramadan fasting periods, different categories of fasting times, but looking at how periods of fasting and lifestyle nutrition changes can really show an improvement in metabolic health. So we're going to break them down condition by condition, but the big picture is these small subsets of issues have not been studied as widely as other things like heart disease per se. So the study aims to review the existing studies that are out there and the effects of intermittent fasting on these conditions. So they look through a comprehensive search on PubMed, on Scopus, Embase, and Web of Science, and they put together an entire series of relevant studies based on their inclusion criteria, and really going to look at the various beneficial effects across these conditions, even looking at type 1 diabetes. Overall, looking at things like reducing inflammation, modulating the immune system response, because we know autoimmune is the body attacking itself in broad terms. Looking at the gut involvement, are we seeing positive improvements there? Because we know immunity, a lot of our immune system response is in the gut and that gut-brain axis. And then also looking at the enhancing of the cellular repair mechanisms through autophagy. So if you're new to fasting, fasting's powerful. It's not just about the scale, and it's going to be about all of these other things. And then the big takeaway is just going to be a positive one in terms of things that you can do or pieces of your fasting lifestyle that you can do or share with folks that are struggling in these areas, and never mind prevent it for you, but also make a greater impact in your social circles?
Yeah, wow, I love that. To take a broad look at autoimmune diseases is to first and foremost say that the health epidemic, the weight epidemic, the obesity and overweight epidemic that affects all of us and all groups of
75% of the population
right,
in the United States right now.
That includes the folks with, battling with autoimmune conditions as well. And so the reason why I bring that up is because the additional weight that's putting stress, that's putting an additional pressure on all systems of the body, also then goes along with these autoimmune conditions to potentially accelerate or exacerbate or make the symptoms worse in the shorter term and potentially in the longer term too. And we'll go into a few of the positive showings and results of some of these subsets as well. But the weight matters whether the autoimmune disease is there or not. And the fact that we're looking at some potential promise here is great, whether there's weight to lose or not for these conditions.
Yeah, and that's the reality is that there's an article from 2014 back in November of 14, so it's been around for a while, where it's in Science Daily, and it's looking at the obesity, the role obesity plays in triggering autoimmune issues. So autoimmune issues like Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, some of the ones we're going to talk about today, is where the immune system attacks its own body rather than the predatory, like the invaders, right? Like space invaders, the viruses, the bacteria, the funguses, all of that stuff, right? So when we're looking at this, the research was showing that obesity leads to the breakdown of the body's protective self-tolerance. So it creates an optimal environment for these autoimmune issues to pop up. Yeah. And it generates a pro-inflammatory, pro-oxidative stress environment that's likely to worsen the disease's progression and hinder its treatment. Right? So we've been aware for a long time, causes of autoimmune issues, infection, smoking, pesticides, lack of vitamins, so on and so forth. But there's a new factor that emerged, which is this, according to the World Health Organization reference in this article back in 2014, that approximately 35% of the global community is overweight or obese. And in the States, it's over 75%. And more than 10 autoimmune diseases are known to be associated with that increased weight. So when we're looking at it, fat is the culprit in fat is the adipokines. My goodness. I tried to add some syllables there. 329 studies. And these are the compounds that are secreted by the fat tissue that are involved in numerous physiological functions, including that immune response, right? So
and the bigger the fat cells get, the more they communicate or miscommunicate with the rest of the body.
Yep. So those adipokines are the ones that they're the pro-inflammatory compounds. So you've got rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes, psoriasis, inflammatory bowel disease, psoriatic arthritis, and Hashimoto. So those are some of the ones that we're going to be talking about that are directly related to these chemicals released. And then you can look at things like vitamin D relationship, which we now know is not just a vitamin that prevents rickety bones or weak bone formation, but we know that vitamin D is a massive player in the role of overall healthy immune function. And we see an inverse relationship in the fasting blood sugar weight loss space, insulin resistance space, where if you have insulin resistance, your vitamin D levels are going to be low. Vitamin D levels are lower in autoimmune issues as well. So this article is really encouraging, Tommy. I just want to kind of run through the different studies and then the category by category, the overview of what the positive benefits were per autoimmune condition. So big picture, if we're looking at figure 1, right, what are the different types of intermittent fasting that was studied or looked at in these studies that they chose for this review?
Yeah, so they looked at a few different kinds that were included in the overall research database analysis. So that included the 5-2 diet, where we're essentially eating either as normal or with a standard number of calories for 5 days, and then 2 days during the week are typically fasting days, or there might be a modified version where there might be 400 or 500 calories coming in on those days too.
But non-concurrent days is the clarification there.
Sure,
Typically, it's 2 non-back-to-back days. So don't think of it like Monday through Friday and then you just fast for the weekend. Well,
right.
You could do that.
Yeah.
In our fasting world, but that's the 5-2 is typically non-concurrent days.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And then time restricted eating, where they're taking some level of, usually it starts off at about 16 hours worth of fasting time with an 8-hour eating window, or we like to think about it as a nutrition opportunity rather.
But not an all you can eat feast.
Yeah. So but it can also be 18-6, for example, or 20/4, or maybe even up to a one single meal in a day. But usually the research usually goes to about 18-6 or 20/4.
And also, sometimes it even starts earlier, Tommy, right? The 12-hour, we joke like the 12-hour, we're like, that's not fasting, that's sleeping. Yeah. And forgetting to eat 14, breakfast, right? Like
14-10. Yeah.
Right. So it with Ramadan too, you kind of get those longer opportunity windows, but it's cool because the benefit's still there regardless.
Yeah, and it's cool for Ramadan as well, because typically when they look at that data, the intent isn't weight loss. So then you don't tend to have these very like, hey, I'm really worried about the food choices, or I'm also changing X, Y, and Z, or I'm doing additional exercise or anything else lifestyle wise. So it's typically just a compartmentalization, and then whatever I feel like I need to eat when the eating opportunity arises, great, I'm going to do that. And then you have that going for a while. So it's interesting that we can see the effects and how they may or may not stay after that part of the year concludes as well. And then you also have alternate day fasting that was also included within the study as well, which depending on the type of version, a lot of times it's modified alternate day fasting, where it's eat quote unquote normal one day, or within a certain time period, but usually it's just regular eating, and then followed by 1 day of either fasting or usually a 400 or 500 calorie kind of smaller mini meal.
Yeah. So when we're talking about these different fasting windows, you'll hear us say this because we get asked this question a lot. What's the best fasting window? Well, the one you can stick to. What's the best workout regimen? The one you can stick to. What's the best financial strategy? The one you're going to do, right? So the varied fasting windows is something, there are some standards, right? So that's why we have the blueprint to fasting for fat loss. It gives you like our basic way to how to look at like a 4-week period, how to ramp up, et cetera. So big picture, they looked at these different intermittent fasting type windows. And the idea was to say, all right, what are the effects of fasting, these varied fasting windows, on the markers that influence, or that the factors that influence this overactive immune or misdirected immune response in these autoimmune conditions. Mm-hmm. So if we just go one by one in terms of the positive clinical implications regarding effects of intermittent fasting, right? So big picture, 30,000 foot view with multiple sclerosis, right? Okay. There's a couple here that really stand out to me. There are some clinical models, that clinical courses of application and pathology in animal models. So I know they're not human studies, but they actually show improvements in the patient, not just management of symptomatology. And I was like blown away by that. Now, animal model, it is what it is. However, if we're looking at the human studies, we see increased gut bacterial richness and beneficial changes to the microbiome. We see increased regulatory T cells, which is a good thing, and decreased Th17 lymphocytes, which is one of the drivers of the immune response in multiple sclerosis, the overactive immune response. We'll see improved brain cortex volume and thickness, which is incredible. Reduced neuroinflammation. I don't have MS. I have a couple of family members that have had it. One is still managing. One has since passed away, a grandparent. But any and all of us can benefit from reduced neuroinflammation, but definitely any reduction in inflammation, neuroinflammation we can get with MS is a positive.
Yeah.
And this one I've experienced with family is the fatigue levels and physical mental health, right? When you're frustrated because you're in pain, you can't move. I mean, improvements in fatigue in the physical mental aspect of managing MS. I mean, that is incredibly uplifting and powerful for anyone that is dealing with MS as a form of an autoimmune issue, right?
That's such a big part of the quality of life decrease in MS right there, where if you can start to have a beneficial change, where even if it starts off small, or even if it was only a small change, anything relative to the baseline is going to be, something that's just wow. It's going to be worth pursuing for sure.
I love when the article that we originally referenced was like historical advocates and benefits. Notable historical figures like Paracelsus and Hippocrates have advocated fasting for its health benefits. I love we have a quote in one of our challenges where we say Homer ate from 800 BC, not the Simpsons character who eats donuts, but it's like hunger will not allow any man or woman to forget their sorrows. Like if you're hungry, like it's pervasive, right? So I love if we go back, the concept of fasting was introduced in the early 20th century, definitely with studies showing benefits like weight loss and improved sensitivity, right? So I love just big picture that they're not just looking at what they're looking at now, in the studies, it was between 2010 and 2023. Mm-hmm. So we're not just looking at the 8% global population effect, or we're not just looking at this increase recently, but they're looking back historically on where fasting was applied as well.
Go ahead. I also thought it was interesting in multiple sclerosis that when you mentioned,
you and I had some peanut butter before this.
Yeah,
episode,
I know, right?
Huh?
When I thought it was interesting when you mentioned the gut bacteria, the gut microbiome, that directly affected the antioxidant level and the lymphocyte level, as well as regulatory T cells in the gut, that then directly impacted the clinical manifestation of the multiple sclerosis. So it was like it was a direct path. It wasn't just a random microbiome, kind of aside. Right. It had a direct clinical application in the disease progression and the severity of symptoms as well.
That's perfect. So if I go big picture, fill in the gap, like that's perfect, right? So if we look at let's go to RA. So one of the things we specifically recommend for RA is about that 48-hour mark, that 48 to maybe 60 up to 72 hour fast for rheumatoid arthritis is incredibly powerful. Mm-hmm. For this application, they saw reduced disease activity scores. So the DAS28, the ESR rates, and the CRP. So ESR and CRP, big picture, not specifically the DAS28 for RA, but big picture, the CRP and the ESR levels, those are just general inflammatory markers, right? So they also saw a reduction in that and decreased production of pro-inflammatory mediators like leukotriene B4 and TNF alpha. We've talked about TNF alpha on podcast episodes in the past. Mm-hmm. They also have reduced acute phase protein. So right initially when the disease is active and starts, and oxidative stress markers, decreased CD4 plus lymphocyte activity. And here's the kicker again for me. All that stuff's great, but improved clinical symptoms, including reduced articular index and morning stiffness markers.
Yeah, that's real. That's every morning when I wake up. What's the first thing that I feel? Yeah.
Right?
Do I get a reminder that I have this disease and I remember from yesterday, but now I'm waking up with a reminder first thing in the morning? Or do I have a little bit of reduced severity first thing in the morning that maybe kicks up a little bit of spark of life, a little bit more than I had yesterday, a little bit like, hey, maybe I can tackle a few things, a few important projects, or maybe have a little more fun, expend some of my energy in some more creative ways today than what I did yesterday. And when you mentioned the 48 to 72 hour fast too, you're getting towards that peak cellular repair, those peak autophagy levels. It's no mystery to us as far as fasting physiology and the timeline of what's been shown to be clinically useful and effective in helping with some of these diseases.
Yeah, 100%. So, couple more. So if we go to psoriasis, for instance, now I have a good friend who has been managing and reversing psoriasis that he's had since teenage years.
Yeah.
With UV, so sunlight exposure, vitamin D, carnivore type dietary applications, because we don't want to leave out the fact that, getting away from refined processed, ultra processed foods and eating more whole foods is definitely better, right? We definitely advocate for nutrition windows, especially if you're fasting.
Nutrition matters.
Yeah, nutrition does matter, of course. Now, in the beginning, you can get away with, if you just start fasting consistently, you're going to see some pretty cool changes.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the studies we talk about are done in standard American diet settings where carbohydrate content is high and meal replacements and convenience in foods and those types of things. So we try to broad brushstrokes, less refined process, less ultra processed, more whole foods are always better. And then he also has been doing fasting. So he notices when he fasts, like his inflammation comes down and can literally watch those plaques shrink with consistent fasting efforts. And it's really stinking cool. So
amazing.
So here it is in the research: reduced psoriasis area and severity index scores.
Wow.
Improved effectiveness of treatments like the mTOR inhibitors, TNF blockers, and the typically prescribed medications, right? So if you choose to do the meds or you're on the meds, guess what? It can help the effectiveness, right? Positive effects on the activity regardless of the prescribed medication. So it's going to help with or without.
Yeah.
Which is really stinking cool and empowering, right?
Yeah.
And then again, back to the big picture, reduced oxidative stress and inflammatory markers.
And here's some of the things too. Some of the longest drug advertisement commercials or ads that you'll see will be for the autoimmune category of diseases.
Yeah.
Because some of these are the most heavily these are drugs that are working across like wide systems of the body, or they're having very, very substantial impact across things that they're not magic bullets, and they're not just a sharp target. They're having broad strokes across the body. So they can be, and some of these are anti-cancer drugs, and some of them are hitting just deep levels of tissue that if you could find a benefit outside of those medications, you would want to head in that direction, or at least have the added benefit of not needing more of those medications. So, I mean, this is incredibly empowering stuff.
Absolutely. Overall general effects, right? Overall categories that we've mentioned. Some other just generalized ones are going to be weight loss and multiple sclerosis, as well as the other conditions. So you're going to see that initial conversation about weight and its obesity and its relationship to this increase in autoimmune issues, right? You're going to see, generalized reduced inflammation and oxidative stress. You're going to see modulation of the immune system overall. So just increased function of those regulatory T cells, which are the good ones.
Yeah.
You're going to see overall changes in the gut microbiome to help a balance and normalize that immune response, the difference between the Th1 and the Th2 immune response, the short term and the long term. And then you're going to see the induction of autophagy and cellular repair mechanisms. So we talked about that with RA, where you'll see the gut stem cell production, right, at that 48 to 72 hour mark, which as we age, we have less and less stem cells, right? Those are the ones that go around and repair the bad stuff, right? So we need those. We want those.
And we can't do it if we're constantly feeding the body. It doesn't have a chance to do those things. It has to be stimulus free for a bit of time in order to actually do those, especially when we're talking about the GI system.
So two categories that we mentioned that we haven't dove into yet, and this is kind of the mixed bag. So we want to add some coaching client context and some real life context to this. So when we talk about lupus and things like Hashimoto's or thyroid related autoimmune issues. From this study specifically, there was a limited and kind of mixed positive clinical outcome. So we've talked about this before. With lupus specifically, there was a decrease in serum leptin concentrations and an increase in those regulatory T cells. There was an increased serum concentration of the anti-DNA antibody in one of the Ramadan studies, but did not see significant changes in the disease itself. So there wasn't really any clinically significant. There were some lifestyle things that they found, as we mentioned previously. And then depending on the stage of lupus, of SLE, they saw some increased levels or increased immune response. So it really just depends on, this is something that we always talk about is, listening to your body. So if you're starting to feel better when you're fasting, right, that's a sign. If you continually try to fast and you just can't figure it out, well, either you're doing it wrong, which at this point, if you've tried multiple times, fasting is simple, right? But it's sometimes not easy. So maybe there's some mineralization,
or it sounds simple.
Sounds simple, or some food choice things that we need to change. But when we talk specifically about thyroid issues, this review specifically suggests potential benefits for things like Hashimoto's because of the overall reduction in inflammation. Now, we did see some thyroid hormone levels change, but the takeaway here is, oh no, if I fast, I'm going to tank my thyroid, or I'm going to crash my metabolism, right? But we talk a lot about stress response and the HPA axis and all of this stuff and cortisol, and there's a lot of players here. But what we found is decreased insulin, increased metabolic function, which promotes long-term homeostasis or balance. So what they found is that once the fasting period was over, the thyroid hormone levels returned to normal. And I thought that was really empowering.
Yeah, it really is, because if we see a short-term change or a short-term blip, sometimes that's interpreted as maybe this isn't the right method for me. But what that could also mean is keep a closer eye on the levels and expect that there might be some balance ahead as well. So if you can be vigilant with it, give it a little bit of time. We just talked about the balancing effect and how that happens with the HPA axis and cortisol, because again, that's another one of those things where it can make people kind of shy away, especially in the beginning. And another thing I wanted to add was I don't know if they had more than 2 studies or maybe 3 studies with respect to lupus. So I don't know how wide or how broad the research.
And they said that too. It was that was one of the main ones. Are like, there definitely needs to be more here for sure.
For sure. Yeah.
So one thing I will mention is, we have a couple of people in our coaching group right now where diagnosed with Hashimoto's, right? Lost all the weight, reversed the condition, decreased the medication. So in these situations, it's a conversation that you got to have with your provider and be like, hey, listen, this is what I want to do to try to do X, Y, Z. I want to reduce the med. I want to come off of it. I'm still having symptoms. I've been on this stuff for years. Like, I don't understand. Why am I still feeling this way? Right.
Yeah.
So it's not a one broad brushstroke, everything's going to be fixed, but I truly believe that removing the interference, allowing the body to do what it knows to do, and the positive benefits of fasting can apply to so many different subcategories in that thyroid category specifically.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where, if you're not willing or ready to make any changes, then, sticking to your standard, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis is probably going to keep you where you're at, right? Or eventually need more intervention. Yeah. But if you're willing to take the necessary steps, then you can make some real sustainable change. The last category we didn't mention yet, Tommy, but they did mention in this paper is type 1 diabetes, right? So with fasting, the risk here was the caution being advised for type 1 diabetes because of the fact that you can have a severe decrease in in blood sugar,
Mm-hmm.
and or issues with diabetic ketoacidosis, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're monitoring your numbers or you're on an insulin pump, then you can absolutely fast. If you're looking for more guidance as a type 1 diabetic, we've had some people in our challenges in our group be like, wow, yeah, I'm doing great. I'm crushing it. I'm like, oh, didn't even know you had it.
Right.
But there's a podcast called Mastering Diabetes. So I want to give a shout out to them because they did mention, so we know that with those two concerns there, that you can absolutely fast. It just needs a little bit more attention, right? So the technology has definitely advanced now where it's much easier to be able to still get great outcomes.
Yeah, the vigilance. But again, to hear the broad brushstrokes sometimes, and just to hear a type 1 diabetic could never fast or something else like that so broadly.
Right.
I hate to hear, that kind of thing, because there are a lot of applications here. So, just looking at the overall categories of autoimmune diseases and the potential here, and also to reiterate the fact that with a lot of patients dealing with autoimmune diseases, they do have some weight that they would like to lose.
Yeah.
And there are very few situations where the medication that is helping, it's helping with the symptoms, or maybe it's helping to manage the disease. There are very few situations where less weight and less excess fat on the body won't make those medications more effective. So even if the fasting, quote unquote, just helped to get some of the excess fat stores off, that would be a win right
you'd
there.
Feel so much better, right?
You would, but it's going to go so much farther than that for so many folks. So dealing with these issues.
So as we wrap up, I want to go back to the tried and true, right? They mentioned Socrates, Hippocrates. We mentioned Homer. Fasting's been around forever, right? It's a powerful tool when applied correctly.
The body's medicine.
Consistent fasting efforts usually win. And it was really encouraging to see, looking at this autoimmune subcategory of conditions, that there were positives abound, right?
Yeah.
Some were mixed, some were better, some were clear cut, but consistent fasting, making an effort to make sustainable changes in your lifestyle requires consistency. So if you're looking for some added support, you can head to the show notes, grab the blueprint to fasting for fat loss. You can head to the website, click the resources tab. We've got the insulin assessment, the sleep guide. If you're looking for an accelerated course, join the next 7-day Master Your Fasting Challenge. We'll take you through all pillars of our program during those 7 days. We'll give you a schedule. We'll hold your hand. We'll have some fun. Tommy will tell some bad jokes. I'll laugh, but we'll have a good time. So Tommy, as always, I appreciate the conversation, sir. Happy fasting, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.